Okay, we will get started tonight. It is Tuesday, April 25th for our work session, and we are going to be talking about fiber tonight. Gary, am I turning the time over to you to get started, or should we turn the time over?
You can turn it right to Utopia.
Okay, excellent. So we'll turn the time over to Utopia to talk about marketing and their efforts.
Hi, I'm Roger with Utopia. We've met before, but thanks for having us back. It's a pleasure to come back and talk fiber. We love talking about fiber. So hopefully you have some questions for us, but we have some marketing information that we were going to share tonight. One of the best things about partnering with Utopia on a project is we've got some really good people, and Kim is awesome. And so she's our Chief Marketing Officer, and she has a whole team that is dedicated to marketing. So this isn't just like, hey, we have geeks like me to figure out network switches and routers and stuff, but we have people who can describe this and sell this and market it, and she's very good at what she does. So I'm just going to turn it to her to go through some of the stuff that we do as we market these. So,
thank you.
Kim?
There's geeks like me who like to translate what geeks like Roger do. So I'm going to kind of start you down the path. Like, Bountiful Fiber is going to be an interesting journey when you're trying to get customers. So I thought about how do I present this and how do I come up, and I can show you what we've done, but I kind of want to walk you down the path of why decisions are made the way they are. So when we're going into a city, right, you have to start with why you guys got into this and what are your goals. Well, and I'm just going to give you examples. These are not definitive goals I've heard from the city, but one is to build out a world-class network for the residents and businesses. And another thing is depending on what you want your take rate to be. Do you want your take rate to be for break-even financial, whatever. So those are the goals when you start the marketing plan out, right? Who is our audience? It's going to be Bountiful City. And then we have to look at the competitors in the area, which you currently, from what my research, is CenturyLink, Xfinity, and Satellite wireless providers. So before we even start what we would do or tactics we've done for others, the things that I think that Bountiful's competitive advantage going into a marketing strategy is that you are community owned. And there's a lot of community pride in Bountiful that you can really play off of. From my experience working at Utopia for 12 years, what we hear over and over again is, where did you hear about Utopia? People are like, from my city. So people believe people who work for the city, who represent the city, because it's the people that you live beside. So it's one competitive advantage. Two, we do a poll of our customers every year, and what are the competitive advantages? It's the speed and reliability. Speed is okay. I would say it is a driving factor for a lot of people to make purchasing choices, but most of all is reliability. They want to know they're up when they have to have a Zoom meeting, right? If you have a Zoom meeting or a telemedicine call, that's one of those things that we need to play off of. And one thing that I love is one of the best competitive advantages you have to any other competition is transparency. Transparency why you're doing it, what the build timelines are, and everything like that. So if you play off that, it's a total win for you when you're going into this. But okay, so how do we reach the residents when we have all this, right? And we're gonna get into those logos in a second. We're gonna do direct mail, digital, social marketing, guerrilla marketing. ISPs are gonna market community events and PR campaigns. We want to get to everybody wherever they consume data. And if they don't consume data, we'll be at community events telling them they should not consume more data, but maybe after they're at the park or something, go inside and do that kind of stuff. But and those are some of the beginning tactics, but I want to go to the next is when we're starting the brand discussion, we have logos. So you all should have a packet in front of you with 3 different Bountiful Fiber logos that we had a creative team come up with. I just want you guys, to ponder them and look at them, but they're using your traditional Bountiful City logo and kind of using the fiber added onto it, and there's some playfulness with a fiber strand in the top part of the logo, and then I have been told that you want the Powered by Utopia brand below it too. But we'll take any feedback that you have and however you want to represent this. Okay, so if we have the logo and we do what are our first steps of how do we get this and when do we start? And I will not look back to my boss, but I'm always in his office like, when can we start? Because it's never too early. And one of the ways we start is, let's say this deal, you know, the contract and everything is finalized. When it is finalized, we're going to do a press release of the partnership and what this looks like and why it is different. We will do a groundbreaking ceremony to celebrate the community and being involved in this. You will also see, immediately before any construction starts, digital and social ads announcing that Bountiful Fiber is here, and it's here for the residents, and doing all of these things with like getting that message out. People will say to me all the time is, why do you market before you're 2 years before you can get there? It's because I need to know that they know who I am when they have the ability to make that decision. So there's going to be drip marketing. There's going to be, like this is, and I just say this hypothetically, but for Utopia City, there is going to be direct mail that hits. We're going to hit them wherever we can, from pre-rolls on YouTube. How many people watch the YouTube and you have to watch through those stupid ads? Well, we're one of those people who do those stupid ads to catch your attention, because it takes up to like 20 times to up to 100 times for somebody to see a brand before they even have brand recognition for some things. So you just want to continually drip this over during the construction process. So when we and one of the other things that we're really great at knowing and doing is construction awareness. People don't think that's marketing, but every touch point during this process, people are going to see what's happening. So I see this every day or every year, we will trench through somebody's grandma's flowers that they planted 50 years ago. Well, what happens is during that construction process, they have a door hanger with who to call, and when they call that person, usually our contractors are on the site within 24 hours to talk to the person and resolve any complaints they have. It is about every touch point from a construction aspect to how, on digital, we are going to make sure this is a customer experience. One thing that's great that we use as a marketing tool is we have signs throughout the neighborhood that we're coming. Any events throughout a city, if anybody wants us there, we'll be there. For example, I was at ULCT last week, and Santa Clara is about to light up, and they were like, well, we need somebody down here for an event on Friday. And I'm like, within 10 minutes, we're like, we will be there. And so now we have 2 people driving down on Friday to be at their community event. So whatever needs, let us know and we'll be there. So then we've talked about a little about the direct mail, social media, and some of the guerrilla marketing that's out there. And now I can pass some of this around. But some of these are ways that you get through. This is a yard sign. It is palatable and not too obnoxious for somebody to put in the garden, but have if they love Bountiful Fiber that much. Another thing that we do, which I think is what I'm known for the most, is I'm originally from North Carolina. And when we started this process of doing installs, we would do post-install surveys, in which we still do today. This was about 10 or so years ago. And we were getting hammered about how bad the install was and blah, 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 what was going on. And I was like, but they're complaining about nitpicky things. And I thought to myself, it's because we're leaving them throughout. We just had a really intensive construction set, right? And we had replaced everything, but we weren't living on a positive note. So when everybody comes and gets installed, they will get what we call a welcome box. What this is it will be branded Bountiful City Fiber, but inside of it, it basically says, we appreciate you. You had other choices, you had other places to go. And it says just a little something, something from us. And it has a blanket. Well, first of all, it has 2 referral gift cards. These referral gift cards are saying, go tell your neighbors about us. And if they sign up, we both get $25 Amazon gift cards. And then there's a blanket that can be branded. And then now we've gotten cheaper through the years because costs are rising. So we have Kirkland brand popcorn and Red Vines. So, and what it really does is leave a little place of, you have other places to spend your money, but we appreciate your spending them with us. You know the amount of complaints we get on installs? Basically none. Nil. It's because if you change the experience of how you leave, it's not how that you drilled through your wall. It's how that you ended it with a little bit of thankfulness. So we do fix the hole. We do take video before and after we do any construction processes so we can restore it back to the original state. Because we want to ensure that when we're representing you, we're representing that this is city-owned and city pride, and we're going to always take care of our residents. So, and this is not, just so you know, one of the other things that we do too, I was about to forget this, is what I call reputation management. And I know everyone in this room has heard it, is that when you go shopping somewhere, you'll get a text and say, please rate us, right? From a lot of places now, or something. We do the same thing after we have any kind of service call, after we have any install. And when you do that, you first of all resolve the problems of the maybe unintended hole. And then second of all, it goes to get to people to go speak about you. Right now on Google, we have, this morning it broke my heart, but we have 1,998 Google reviews for Utopia Fiber with a 4.6 rating. How many other telecom companies in this nation can say they have a 4.6 rating with over 50,000 customers at this point? We stand behind what we do. Marketing isn't just about the pretty things and the videos and all that. It's really about the feeling of taking care of the customer. And at the end of the day, if you take care of the customer and like listen to them, you'll get the take rates, you'll get the penetration in the heartbeat. Because in this day and age, and I will say this, I'll say to Roger, and don't think that I don't do a great job at my job, but at the end of the day, consumers just want to be heard. They want to be heard and they want to be listened to. And it's amazing, I run customer service too, because a chief marketing officer really encompasses customer service. But what I say to them is when somebody calls in, you know how many people love that they're talking to a neighbor? I've seen more brownies and popcorn and stuff sent to my customer service agents than I've ever seen around the country, because people will call back up and get a customer service agent who's been there for 4 years and go, oh, Jesse, I talked to you 4 years ago. And they just recognize those. Those little small touch points of showing that you care adds a whole nother value. And it's incredible what it really changes the experience for everybody. Because installations and construction are not easy. So you just have to know that accidents will happen, but we're there. And we're there to help you out. So there's my little speech about marketing. Any questions around this? And I have direct mail and all kinds of things if you wanted to see some more.
So I just want to recognize that we have Councilwoman Bradshaw online joining us remotely. So I just wanted to see if we could do a little test and see if we can hear you if you want to speak. Are there any questions that you have at this point, Councilwoman Bradshaw?
Thank you, Mayor. No questions yet at this point. Hello from Washington, D.C. I would just mention for those that are at the podium, if you can make sure that when you're speaking, you're at the podium. If you back away from the podium and keep speaking, I can't hear you.
I apologize. I should have gotten that warning from the beginning.
Yeah, I should have let you know. Thank you. So yeah, if everyone can speak into the mic, and thank you. Glad that we could hear you and that you're here with us remotely. Any questions from the council?
Mayor, I have a couple of questions, and also I'll preface it with a statement. One thing that you said struck a real chord with me, and it was, I'm quoting, "We're here for the residents." And I think that as long as the marketing and the messaging is clear that this project is for the number one goal is to be here for the residents. I think that is going to be the most important message that we get across. I do have a question about the community events. Is there a finite number? And as far as the entire marketing campaign, is there a start to finish anticipated time frame with that?
Regarding the city events, however many that you would like for us to be there, we will. I mean, we've done small events for community, just gatherings for the seniors in West Valley to some of the biggest festivals. We always even do it on holidays. We're usually at West Point's 4th of July ceremony. I mean, we have to be reasonable, like it's kind of like prioritize some of the newer cities who don't have the take rates or what we're really trying to get the message out. We'll probably be at those cities more than we would be at like a more mature network. But yes, for the beginning few years, wherever you want us, we will be there because we understand the importance of doing the lead up marketing. On, what was your second question? I forgot that. So I would say that there's no finite time. I would say from when I am given the go-ahead by this gentleman, I'm off to the races. And I think there's never going to be an end time that marketing stops. There's going to be a place where you're getting to that like take rate or market penetration, where you're going to focus more efforts and more spend on that. And as you mature, the marketing efforts might change. But you never want to quit marketing in one of these, because you always want the awareness to be out there. Because if you're not actually awareing the public, somebody else is going to come in and try to take that market share back.
So let me say a few things. So we didn't talk much about website presence. There's gonna be a lot of information on a website in the plan. You know, we kind of started a default. We'll have things like we do at Utopia, but we'll have a separate instance for Bountiful Fiber. So you have your own custom information
It could be your
there.
own website.
So yeah, and I don't know what the domain name or URL or whatever
We're
is that
working
yet.
through that.
That's getting figured out now. But the idea is people go to the website and you'll have your schedule of your build out posted there. We'll probably have a 3-year build out schedule posted. And then internally we have a goal to finish it within 2 years. But it gives us some flexibility when we run into an obstacle. We could have some delays or whatever and still come in within the 3 years. So it's a little bit of under promise and over deliver, and that's good for residents. They'd rather, you know, have things hit their timeline or a little bit better than later. So you'll have that schedule post online, and then her marketing team is very closely tracking progress of the construction to know what areas are going to be turned on and available for installations.
Yeah, so we're looking at all of that. The marketing will basically be contingent on when the area lights up, and then we have like a whole marketing stream, but we have overall marketing as well that hits. So do it like somebody in a...
Just a reminder to use the mic if you could.
Somebody in a new footprint, like what we call footprints or the build areas. So they would get more marketing when their area is released, because we don't want to like necessarily go to the whole city with that message, because it's a different message of sign up now. And then some people in other areas will get just general marketing of the awareness until they can sign up. But when I talk about transparency, and I think Roger mentioned it, is those build timelines. In no other telecom that I've really seen do you see build timelines on the website. With construction practices, as anybody who's ever known construction, they never come in usually on time. So we do buffer them by quarters just to be very cautious. So we always want to underpromise and overdeliver on everything that we do. And when the website and we get that all figured out, and the marketing starts, then we will start gathering interest of all the residents, and we have email campaigns to keep them updated on the progress as well during the progress when they're doing that.
Thank you for your outlining the marketing plan. That's been one of the concerns I've had along the way, and so I appreciate the detail and the things that you're presenting. And I like that we start early, or anticipate starting early. Assuming we move forward with fiber and the build out is, you know, it sounds like 2 to 3 years, and we start marketing day one, which is great. If a potential customer wants to sign up, knows they want to sign up immediately or get on a wait list, how does that work, and how do you kind of navigate that and keep them?
Yeah, so once we start announcing it, we'll have the website up. And so we'll say, do you want to reserve your spot right now? And we will hopefully have all the timelines up when the website launches. Sometimes there's a little bit difference depending on it, if it gets announced. And then when we capture that, we'll start doing email campaigns of when we're coming, what's happening in their neighborhood. We're getting a lot more granular on that information so we can keep residents up to date on what's happening. Because a lot of times on these projects, you'll see the main line come through of the fiber for your section of the neighborhood, but they might have to do the other section, so it could be a month or so before, or month or two before actual in-home installs happen. And so we try to explain that, like, we haven't forgotten you, we just have other construction until we can actually light up the area. So, because most people are not familiar, so we like to be very transparent and like speak to people in very simple, like easy to know terms about construction process instead of getting too detailed on it. But yeah, we do email campaigns, and we have our Facebook, We announce everything on all our social medias of any footprint releases or where we are, so people can be very aware. Anytime a new footprint does open, we contact every person personally, like we call them and tell them, hey, you've shown interest, do you want to sign up now? And it gives that personal touch as well.
Yeah, I think you covered, I mean, there's a lot of ways for people to get their information in there, but it's, if we have it, if they've, searched their address to see if they could get services, say we can't get you right now, they can submit their information so that we reach out proactively when the day comes. But at the same time, I mean, we post on the city's, social media channels, like, hey, this area is ready, and if you're in this green area, you can log in and sign up. Email campaigns, ads, other things like that. There's just a lot of ways we try really hard. But we get the question often, like, why are you guys marketing so much? Isn't it supposed to be the service providers marketing this? And it's both. I mean, really, the city is invested in this. We need to get take rate to make sure this thing pays for itself. We're coming in with a very high level of confidence. I mean, demand is through the roof in the city. We're very confident hitting those take rates, but that doesn't mean we're going to relax and let it take care of itself. We're going to make sure that we hit those take rates and then some. And that gives a lot of protection to the city to make sure you're not actually having to subsidize this. So, yeah, it's us and it's the service providers. Service providers have access to our information. We share addresses and areas as they come online, and they have their whole efforts that they do to both contact customers and also try to differentiate themselves from the other providers. And that's all great. Like, we don't really care which provider you pick. If you come to us, to the website, the Bountiful Fiber website, and sign up, you're presented with a shopping cart where you do select which provider you have, and we have tie-ins to like Google ratings, and people can do a little research on them and try to decide what they want. What we see really often though is, despite tools we put on there, a lot of people, you're going to see people posting online like, hey, I want to sign up, but I don't know which provider to pick. And these referrals and online communications are really helpful for all of that. But it's kind of the space of the service provider to differentiate, but at the end of the day, they're coming to us for Bountiful Fiber, and they're kind of picking the flavor they want of that. And if they end up picking a provider and have a bad experience, not common, but if they do, it's only a 1-month commitment when they sign up. They can cancel, but more commonly they would just switch providers and stay on the fiber network, and we want that. That's why we have a relationship with the customers, and we market so heavily. We want people to know that they're here for Bountiful Fiber, and if they have a bad experience, we're going to resolve that to our best extent, and also help them get to a different provider rather than leave the system and go back to cable or wireless or something.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, it's our customer. It's not just the ISP's customer, it's our customer too. I say this as I say to my customer service team who's sick of hearing me. I say, we need that customer and make sure to save them as best you can. So I even give the power to our customer service team to a limit every month of, if somebody had a bad experience and we need to resolve it to keep them as a customer, give them a $25 Amazon gift card. That keeps the customer and they're happy and they'll tell friends. It's some of the best marketing is when they have not the greatest experience and you resolve it. They are the biggest ones who are out there telling people how great the service is, even though we never want bad experiences, boss man.
And I also don't want to come off as presumptuous. We know this is a decision
Yeah,
that we made.
it's like talking in third person.
We're doing this in a lot of cities right now, and so we're like, yeah, we're doing all of these things, but not here yet. We're just trying to describe how this would be if you choose to move forward with this.
Excellent, thank you. What other questions do you have, Council?
Mayor, if I may.
Yes.
I appreciate that your last statement, that we're not quite to that stage yet, but, so I appreciate that. And as far as build timelines on the website and the footprint release, where you've done this before, do you put anticipated timelines for those different footprints? And so people can see, oh, I'm maybe a year away.
Yes.
I might be 2 years away.
Yeah, if you want to go to the Utopia Fiber website, and then you can see how we do it there. And we just put projected timelines for those areas. And if it changes or whatnot, we'll always update those with the newest timelines. In the past few years, most of the footprints that we've done have come in a couple months earlier than anticipated on the website.
Yeah, and the current version we have is it's useful. It's like, here's a map and you can find yourself where you're at and find the schedule for it. We're working on a more interactive map. I'm hoping that that's in place by the time we would do a Bountiful website and project, but even if it's a more static, clunky site, it's still, people can go in there and see where they're at and figure out when they would get service. It's not terrible, but we're working on improving things. But that information, again, back to transparency, everybody will say, oh yeah, this is what's going on. This is how the system's gonna roll across the city. We had to make sure that certain people were on the top of the list. I'm kidding. No, there's no, there's no preference. It's all based on our, basically construction cycle of when we can build what areas. There's some weather impact, and then there's also proximity to the existing backbone route that's in the city. So those areas, kind of in this section of the city would likely be first as we move further and further away from I-15 where our backbone is, and some of the routes come up to the city facilities. So sorry, no bribes or influence on the schedule. It's all construction based.
And I will speak to this on, because sometimes when you're looking at a timeline and you know you're 2 years out, it's hard, right? I think the first time I got a little bit of lesson of this is when Utopia, this was years ago, announced that we were going to finish the build in 5 years, the original cities, and we had to put people on that website and say, your build is 5 years away. And it's a tough pill to swallow, but what we've learned where people were happier that you were honest with them instead of saying it's next year, and then 4 years later, the 4th anniversary of next year, you finally get it. People are okay, I think more, I mean, there's always gonna be people upset with the timelines, but people are more okay if you're just really open with where you are.
Yeah, and those timelines were financing dependent. These projects, like lately, all these city partnerships Utopia has done, we've been very fast and way ahead of schedule. So we just wrapped up Pleasant Grove. Was that a year and a couple of months? And when we started it,
that was just, that was old Utopia that when we were finishing,
yeah, the 5-year thing, that was old Utopia.
Yeah.
So our construction capacity is far more than it's ever been in our history, doing about 40,000 feet of
We did.
construction every week,
We did 3 miles feet last year, or 3 million
3 million
feet of,
feet of construction last year. So we have a lot of resources to put into this and move quickly. We don't want to overwhelm the city, so there's kind of a balance there. But we're very excited. Like we're going to over deliver on this if you do proceed with us.
and one thing I would like to mention is I speak, like when Roger said, I speak in like generalities that Utopia can handle this if you decide to go forward. But if you have somebody on your team or somebody who can fill some of these roles, we're more than happy to work with people. I want to use any resources that you have. Coming in to say, I don't want to assume anything if their partnership did happen.
Can I ask a follow-up to that question? Something you mentioned earlier is the goal would be to avoid city subsidizing of the marketing plan?
That's what, like, I just put that in as one of your goals that you would want to break even on the financing of the project. I don't know if that was just kind of like a example of that, if that was your main goal. That's not something for me to decide.
Okay, so I just kind of wondering, in cities that you have partnered with, is there city subsidizing of the marketing plan? What does this normally look like? Is there some additional input there, or is it primarily Utopia's?
So there's kind of a baseline of marketing that we would do that's included in the project, and it's like, well, if you want to go above and beyond what Utopia does, we can say, oh, great, we'd love to work with you on that, and that has a cost. So that's an option to you if you chose to want to resource things more. But the default is kind of the normal stuff, the flyers, the participation in events, that sort of thing is just kind of the normal, what we do. It's not intended that marketing be a major additional cost or something like that. But obviously, we're putting this out there and saying this is the baseline, and if you have customization you want to do, that's fine.
We would love any like support, because the more the city can get involved, like you say, things that have worked really well are like utility flyers, of putting just a flyer in your utility bill. We're actually testing a very interactive display that you can put in City Hall, that somebody can kind of like see testimonials and go through the whole sign-up process in the City Hall with a TV, interactive TV that's coming out right now in some of the cities. So There's so many things that we're always looking at new avenues of what we can do to make sure we're bringing the awareness of what's happening out in the community.
Yeah.
That's-
One example that I want to bring up is like, it's very common in this industry to do door-to-door marketing. We don't like that. We're cities. Usually our cities and residents are like, I don't want people going and knocking on doors and selling that way. So we would default and say, we don't do that. If you were like, hey, we really want to get out there and do door-to-door marketing, we'd be happy to do it and decide what's appropriate and what's not, and figure out what that would cost. We have done it in our past. We have experience with it, but our current marketing plan does not include that sort of marketing. But that's just an example of something outside the scope that could be added if you chose to.
That's great. Thank you so much for that information. Unless there are other questions that the council members have for you at this time, then I think we can turn it over to Gary and see if you have some kind of basic overview things that we could look at regarding fiber.
Yes, thank you. And I would invite our Utopia guests not to go far in case I, misrepresent anything or need some additional detail or backup. I'd just say that we are coming to the culmination of, if you can believe it, 3 years of research, analysis, and study on this. And the fact that Pleasant Grove is done, did I hear that right? Construction is complete? Yeah, after we started our conversations here about fiber, Pleasant Grove made their decision and got their financing, and so that's kind of exciting. But it is a little shocking to hear that we've been considering it, for that long. And for maybe those that are new to this conversation, not on the council but in the public, it might be worthwhile for me to spend just a minute and talk about some of those major milestones. It really began in the spring of 2020. And we had questions about the availability of broadband in Bountiful before then, and if Bountiful had any intentions of getting involved. But it was really the spring of the pandemic that our residents began to come to City Hall and ask, what can the city do for us? I believe it was that summer that Utopia came and did a presentation when we were at our temporary offices and at our council meetings in the fire district building. It was round about April 2021 when the council directed us and we issued a request for information from providers about what options could we consider as a city. And we opened the door for all kinds of potential partnerships. City-owned, provider-owned, city-owned, provider-operated, on and on. We received a few responses to that, I think 4 or 5. We evaluated those, brought that information to the City Council in August 2021, and then we hired Magellan Advisors to come in and do the financial feasibility study. They completed a survey, they did financial analysis on what a project might look like in Bountiful, found out what the potential interest in Bountiful would be for a city-owned network, whether we operated that ourselves or we operated it with a partner. And there's a lot of good information that I won't repeat here, but one of the biggest takeaways from that was that 60% of the residents in Bountiful, all things being equal, in other words, if price and reliability were equal, would prefer a Bountiful-owned utility or fiber network to a competitor because they trust Bountiful. They know the benefit they receive from our power system and our water system and the landfill, et cetera. So in June 2022, we issued a request for proposals, for formal proposals from providers to provide a partnership with us where we would own the network and our partners would build and operate the system. We had a few responses, but 2 that were specifically responsive, one from Strata Networks and one from Utopia. We received those and reviewed those in November. And on December 12th, we interviewed firms, and on January 10th, we presented those findings to you all of this year, and you gave us direction to begin negotiating a contract with Utopia Fiber. It's amazing. That seems so simple compared to the amount of work and thought that has been put into this. But there's a lot of data and analysis behind the scenes to suggest that this is an appropriate move for Bountiful if we want to do it. In the meantime, we began also working with our financial advisor, Jason Birmingham from Lewis Young Robertson in Birmingham, to present scenarios to the City Council regarding financing. He identified after we and in consultation with Utopia what the bonding and project costs would be. Utopia's proposal was a project construction cost of $45.3 million. I think it's worth pointing out that the cost projected by the Magellan study was closer to $50 million. And so we're pretty pleased with this potential partnership. We are looking at a bond between 45 and 50 million. I think at this point we're settling in on a bond cost of $47 million for the project. That would allow us to pay for the contract cost of construction, as well as the buyout of a certain amount of network that Utopia has already put in Bountiful. Utopia has a certain number of non-residential customers, and through the years has put in fiber already in some areas of Bountiful. That buyout of their existing infrastructure and customers would happen once we sign the agreement, and would generate some instant revenue for the city, as well as ensure that, in the event that we ever wanted to part ways in the future, that we have a network that, consistent with the council direction, is purely Bountiful's network, that we own all of the infrastructure. Buyout cost for that is $850,000. And so with the project cost and the buyout cost and a bond of $47 million, it would give us just a little bit of room between our known costs and what might be an unanticipated cost. Say we wanted to add connectivity to some of our parks, or we had some unforeseen event come that wasn't contemplated in the construction contract, that we'd have a little bit of flexibility there. There were some items in the staff report that I think are worth pointing out, and would like some feedback from the council on those items. The first is really just a reiteration of the philosophy of this, and it was alluded to earlier that our intention as a city to get into this business was the result of many requests over a long period of time from our residents. It's worth pointing out that in between the time that residents started to ask in spring 2022 and we issued the request for information, that staff members and council members reached out to some of the incumbent providers to see if they would come and fill the voids that we were experiencing in our community. And we were not able to receive from them any sort of build-out plans or commitments, data about speeds in town, or it was challenging. And I understand that it's a business, and they weren't necessarily. It's not necessarily in their best interest to share their business plans, but it was challenging because we found no traction in being able to get the incumbent providers to fill gaps in our community, despite our efforts. So the philosophy of Bountiful Fiber is to provide a service that is not being provided in the community, and to do so at a break-even rate. We will necessarily have costs that will exceed revenues for the first few years. We will spend approximately $5 to $6 million in capital costs before we generate much in the way of revenue. But we're very comfortable that with some conservative take rates, that we will see a net revenue on the system beginning in about year 3, and by year 6 or 7, between years 6 and 11, we will pay back the obligations that we've made to ourselves for that capitalized interest portion at the beginning. And then from there on out, it is the intention of the city that as our revenues exceed our bond payment requirements, that the benefit of that will go back into paying down that debt as soon and as quickly as we can for the benefit of the residents. And as Utopia has said, with their own networks, because we're cities, we're not in the profit business, we're in the service, we're service providers. We want to provide services for reasonable cost and recover our costs. And so in the future, once our debt obligations are paid off, if we're able to take those revenues and put them back into reducing the cost of the network, that is the intention of the city. So that's sort of the philosophical underpinnings of what we're doing and why. I guess I would ask if there are any questions about that from the council or any comments, especially from those members that have been, doing this for the last 3 years as well and been very heavily involved in this.
Mr. Hill, I don't have a question, but I'd like to read the last couple of sentences of your bonding section, if I could. Just to reiterate what you just said. It is the intent of the city to prepay the bond, well in advance of the 30-year term. All excess system revenues will be used to achieve the goal of repaying obligations as soon as possible and to then make rates as affordable for users as possible. I think it's important that folks know that we're committed to that any extra revenue that comes in is going to go directly to paying down that debt. So thank you for making that a priority.
Yes, you're welcome. And I think that's important. I don't know what our thoughts were, and there were rumors, I think, in the broader communities that this could really be a cash cow, and likewise there were rumors that you're never going to break even, you're going to lose money on this. And I'm very confident that it's now a question of we are going to generate sufficient revenues to pay for this service. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. It's entirely dependent upon take rates, but a 35% take rate is basically our break even and pay ourselves back point. I'm very confident in that now. I'm equally confident that it's never going to be a massive revenue generator for the city that's going to somehow mean we can do away with the city's property tax or sales tax or anything like that. But it will pay for itself. And as far as technology goes, fiber is about as technology proof as you can get. The speeds are basically unlimited and dependent upon not the infrastructure but the technology at either end of the fiber. I've learned a lot about fiber in the last few years. I think we all have, but I'm very confident that this is a financially sound decision for the city. So with that, moving on to the bonding, Richard mentioned sort of the punchline about what our intention with bonding is. It will be necessary to bond. We will have to finance this within, I believe, 60 days. We'll have to finish financing within 60 days of the execution of the contract. That public bonding process requires public hearings. A public hearing, there will be a required public hearing with that process where we'll explain the terms of the financing and the uses and everything else. A very open and public process. The bonds that we are anticipating issuing are excise tax bond or sales tax revenue bonds. All that means is that we are pledging essentially the city's sales tax revenues as a backing for the bond in order to get a better interest rate. A system revenue bond for fiber, as we learned from Jason Birmingham, isn't really something available in the market. But an excise tax or sales tax revenue bond for other uses is a very, very common method of financing for cities. I did my first one about 18, 19 years ago in Park City for some financing for the RDA, where we issued sales tax bonds but used RDA revenue to actually pay for the debt service. It's what we would be doing here. All system revenues would be used to pay the debt service. We're simply pledging essentially the city's good credit toward the backing of the bond. Any questions about financing and bonding at this point?
I do, just regarding, if I could just back up a little bit, the confidence you have, and I think the city staff has in this being a financially sound investment for the city. Can you just maybe give a little background as to how we came to that conclusion, and it's not just strictly an opinion?
Oh, yeah, no, happy to. It begins with the history of Utopia as a partner and the take rates that they've seen with their partner cities. The cities such as Centerville have 45% take rate. I believe the average take rate system-wide, including the cities that are brand new, is over 30%. The average take rate in the first 2 years of the UIA cities that are being constructed under this new model of financing everything up front and not waiting to build as revenues become available, like was the original Utopia model. I want to say that if I looked at the data correctly, that within the first 2 years of construction, the average take rate is right about 30%, 35%. Utopia for Bountiful, and based on their experience, predicts that in our first year, we'll see during construction, maybe 5% take rate. We'll have a very limited proportion of Bountiful available. The next year, conservatively 12. The year after that, they predict 30 to 35%. The year after that, 40%. The year after that, 50%. Even if we are more conservative than that, this model works very well. We created a pro forma that plugs in all of the system expenses, debt service, anticipated take rates, variables such as inflation for new connections above and beyond the 40% that are guaranteed as part of the contract, and gave ourselves a variety of scenarios and take rates to see when and where we would break even, when we would start to repay our capitalized interest costs at the beginning. And I mentioned it earlier, but the magic number is basically 7,497 connections, or 35% take rate. I think a 35% take rate based upon the experience of the other UIA and Utopia cities is very, very achievable and Bountiful. And go ahead, Roger, please.
So just to demonstrate, this is more an issue of timing than a take rate. 45% probably was accurate for Centerville. We're at 49 point, not quite where I can round up to 50, 49.2 was the last report we did, and that's just because we're probably 6 months past or whatever when you saw that number. But that's the best indicator. We could do surveys and feasibilities and stuff all day long, and it's like a real city nearby with similar competitive options, with the same operator and similar marketing and all that stuff, is a far better indicator of anything else. And so being next door to 49.5%, 49.2% take rate, you're going to do really well here. So
We have the distinct advantage too of through this partnership that, Centerville, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Centerville was one of the original Utopia cities. They were not built out all within 2 to 3 years. It was a neighborhood at a time, and then they would move to a neighborhood in Brigham City, or they'd move to a neighborhood in Orem as demand dictated. This new model that has been in operation means we start, we finish, which means the sooner we start, and the sooner we complete footprints, the sooner we have subscribers, which means our take rates should accelerate much more quickly than Center. They will. I mean, I'm pretty confident that that's the case.
Question.
Thank you.
Excuse me. So you mentioned the 40% part of the contract with Utopia. Can you touch on a little bit of what happens if we have 45% take rate and how that affects the finances?
You bet. So the contract amount with Utopia guarantees Utopia will pay for, Utopia will build all of the infrastructure to provide fiber to 100% of the community. So it includes all of the main line, the fiber huts, the boxes, the distribution boxes whose specific name I do not remember, that go from the main line to the neighborhood, to the homes. But it also includes connections to up to a 40% take rate. So once we exceed a 40% take rate, then it's a cost per installation kind of a situation where it's about currently around $1,300 to drop service to a new customer. That number, will change as inflation increases over the years. But at that point, then we will be paying for the installation costs, essentially $1,300 per installation. Now, we're not proposing as staff that we charge customers after 40% that they pay that. That just simply gets built into the network, and it doesn't matter if you are the 7,496th or 4,798th customer that pushes us over. Your installation cost is just part of your Utopia fee. There's no sign up to basically one-time pay to play. We think that's a disincentive for people to join the network after you've reached a certain take rate, and we don't want to do that. So the pro forma that I mentioned that you asked about, Millie, includes what happens when we achieve a 40% M+ take rate. And in those years, we'll have an additional capital construction cost. But provided that our very modest projections are accurate, we'll be able to pay for those out of our revenues, and without in any way impacting our ability to pay our debt service or keeping our revenues on a growth pattern sufficient to pay for our own capital interest. That was a long, lengthy, and wordy explanation. Sorry.
What other questions do you have, Council?
I have a question. One thing you referenced earlier is the survey, which was one of the findings was majority of respondents said all things being equal, they would prefer Bountiful owned fiber. Am I stating that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. Do you feel like things are still like all things will be equal or better for the consumer, for the resident who chooses this option, that all things being equal or better exists
Well,
with our current projections?
others might, I think, how can I say this without sounding overly optimistic, but I think if you talk to nearly anybody who has Utopia Fiber, they will tell you that they have far better reliability than they've ever experienced before. I'm very confident that that was going to be the same case in Bountiful. Our pricing is critical too, and at the current pricing for the debt service for a $47 million bond, and the price that we would have to charge residents to recover that cost, combined with the ISP and Utopia's costs, make our system costs nearly identical to what our neighbors in Centerville are paying for the same. And so I'm very confident that we're going to be able to charge a rate that is very competitive and with a product that is better than the incumbents.
We need to wrap it up. Any last questions from the council?
I would just like to make one comment for people who may be listening at home. I think it's important to point out that when sales tax was mentioned, I think people might misinterpret that as saying that we would increase sales tax to fund the project, when that's definitely not it. The only people who would be paying for this, although that the city would be taking on a bond, would be the people who only subscribe to the network. And it's also important that the marketplace will still, other companies will still be available. We're not saying all residents have to use Utopia. We're saying this is another option for our residents, and only the people who want to subscribe for it, those are the people who will be paying it back long term.
That's a great clarification. Thank you, Councilwoman Segura Bar. Any other last questions from the council? Okay, we will adjourn and be back in a few minutes for our regular council meeting. Thank you so much.